thanks again for doing this. Well, let's start at the beginning. What was Rob like as a child? I heard you say one time that he was a really active kid. He was into a lot of things.
He was very active. He started walking when he was only 7 months old. Was just constantly climbing on things, getting into things, just constant motion.
Typical boy, huh?
Typical boy and then some.
Now, from what I've read, he was a very intellectually curious kid. He loved history. Can you tell me about that? What did he like about history?
He was mostly interested in things having to do with the military. When he was very young, as soon as he could start drawing like stick figures and things like that, it was always battle scenes. He would draw airplanes and soldiers holding guns, things like that. It was just something that was innate in him, that he was so interested in anything having to do with the military. One particular incident I remember was when he was about 5 years old, and we were living in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. About 3 blocks or so from our house was a Jewish synagogue, and I had heard on the news that this synagogue had been defaced. And I thought this was maybe a teachable moment for my children. And we walked up to the synagogue and looked at it, and someone had painted swastikas and expletives. I can't remember now what all was written on there. But I was pointing it out to my children and saying how, these people hate the Jewish people. And my children had Jewish friends, and my son Rob had a Jewish preschool teacher, so they were familiar, with differences in religion and things like that. So I showed them that, and when we got home, right away Rob went for some crayons and paper, and he wanted me to show him how to draw a swastika. And I was kind of alarmed at that at first, but then I realized it was for his battle scenes. The bad guys would have flags with swastikas on them, and the good guys would have the American flag.
Oh, wow. He wrote a poem, too, fairly early on. Could you tell me about that?
That was in 8th grade. They had at St. Michael's School in Wheaton, in 8th grade, they would do a poetry book, and I think it was pretty much just write about anything you wanted. Each student had his or her own page, and the poems were sometimes just 4 or 5 lines, sometimes whole pages. And Rob wrote a fairly lengthy poem on the Battle of the Bulge, particularly dealing with the town of Bastogne. And it was about just how the soldiers hung on there and survived. And we didn't even know it at the time, but one of my husband's uncles was in that battle. And it was, he was just one of these guys who did not talk about his World War II experiences. But a few years later, one of my other children was doing an interview as part of a class project. That's when he started talking about being in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah, my uncle was there. Yeah. Unfortunately, he was one of them got captured right off the bat. But he got out.
He got out, okay.
Yeah, he's okay. In terms of, in reading some of the articles, friends and adults say that, like his Boy Scout leader said that they really identified some leadership qualities in Rob early on, that he was not the typical kid in that respect. He had some very grown-up qualities about him.
Yes, a lot of people told us he had leadership skills, but he exercised them outside of the house.
I understand. He had, we talked about his interest in history, but he was also interested in music. Could you talk about he had a wide range of interests?
Rob really did have a wide range of interests. He started playing trumpet in band in grade school. He continued that through, I think, his freshman year at Wheaton North, and then he switched to tuba, and he played tuba for 2 years also. No, he played it for 3 years at Wheaton North. And he also took guitar lessons, so he didn't play guitar like in front of the family, but I know that he would be practicing it, and he downloaded a lot of music for how to play the guitar chords for different songs, so I know he was practicing that. And after we moved to Florida, we got a piano, and I remember Rob coming home for the first time after we got that and just being excited that we had a piano, and he sat down and started practicing it right away and was teaching himself how to play the last few times he was home.
And he had a pretty good affinity for foreign language too, if I understand correctly.
Rob had a natural talent for foreign languages. When he was very young, we had friends who were Cambodian refugees, and he spent a lot of time with them because they had several children that were the same age as my older children. And I remember specifically one time having our Cambodian friends over for supper, and Rob was only about a year and a half or so. He was sitting in the high chair next to the table, and at one point he points over to some food on the table, and he says, "Nyam," which, you know, I thought was just baby talk, but my Cambodian friends looked at each other in amazement, and they said, "He just said eat in Cambodian." And I think maybe that early exposure to another language helped. And also my husband and I, when we would want to say something in front of the children but not have them understand, we would speak to each other in German. So he would hear that, and of course that made him want to learn German. So in high school he studied German and Latin, and then with his Special Forces training he studied French. And then he also studied, taught himself really, Pashto while he was in Afghanistan. And he was also learning Russian too.
And his ability to learn Pashto really helped him, you know, become familiar with the people he was fighting with and fighting for, and people really embraced him because he took the time. He was interested enough to learn about them, from what I've read.
He did get along very well with the Afghan soldiers that he worked with. I'm not sure how much he went into their homes. Of course, there's security issues with that, and I never asked them, do you go to their houses and talk to them? But they were very good friends. And several months after he died, we received a hand-knotted wool carpet from the Afghan soldiers he worked with. It's like a map of Afghanistan surrounded by different historic and scenic areas of Afghanistan, and Rob's name and his unit number are worked into the part of the design. And then also just this past January, when one of Rob's teammates had recently come back from Afghanistan, he brought us a hand-carved, hand-painted wooden plaque that says on it, "In memory of Staff Sergeant Robert J. Miller, you are not forgotten, your friend Ibrahim." And it was from one of the interpreters that they had worked with. I have pictures. Oh, I don't have a picture of the rug, but I do have a picture of the plaque with me.
I kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but I did want to work that in. He was a pretty darn good athlete too, from what I've read and seen. Tell me about his interest in gymnastics.
Rob started doing gymnastics when he was only 3 years old, and I signed him up for that, even though at that time we were really struggling for money, but I thought the gymnastics lessons would be worthwhile. Whenever we would have him out at a playground and he would be hanging upside down from playground equipment, people would ask me, is he taking gymnastics lessons? So I thought it might be a good fit for him, and it was. So he continued that for about 3-4 years. And he just lost interest, and he wanted to do other things. He wanted to play baseball, do the little league stuff. So we did have him stop taking gymnastics lessons. And then when he got to high school, that interest reignited. He started doing gymnastics right away his freshman year and stuck with it and got to be very good at it.
Yeah, I've read that he was quite the guy on that. And Bobby's going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later. He attended college in Iowa for a year, and about the time, a little bit before your family moved to Florida. Is that about right?
No, we were, let me see, he graduated from Wheaton North in 2002. Then he did a full year at University of Iowa. So, and it was so he finished up University of Iowa like early May 2003, and it was in July of 2003 that we moved to Florida. So he actually just stayed up in Illinois even after we moved. He had already signed his enlistment papers. He was in the delayed entry program. So it was in August of 2003 that he reported for duty.
What did he say about his decision to join the Army at that point? From what I've heard, it seemed like that was the natural path he was going to go at some point or the other.
It was the natural path. He always talked about it even when he was very young. And I think he might have even gone straight into the military out of high school, except for the fact that he was just so into gymnastics at that time. He wanted to try out gymnastics in college. He was hoping to get on the team. That did not work out, but I think he just decided, that I've always wanted to do the military. I may as well just go ahead and do it. So.
And it seemed like he was a natural fit. He made promotions pretty quickly from what I've seen.
He did, yeah.
What did he say about actually finally being in there and moving into a very elite unit, the Green Berets? He
was very proud that he was able to get into the Green Berets. Just very happy. I think he had a very high opinion of himself all along. He did not suffer from low self-esteem at all. And I think he expected that he would get into the Green Berets, but there was still part of him that thought, what if I don't make it? So he was, relieved and happy that he did make it in.
It seemed like he was thriving in it from everything. He had an earlier tour of duty in Afghanistan, is that right?
Yes, Rob was in Afghanistan from August 2006 till I think it was like late March 2007. And we didn't even know it at the time, but within about 10 days or so, within a month of getting there, he already did one action for which he would get the Army Commendation Medal for Valor. He would tell us a lot when we talked to him. We didn't talk to him that often. We'd have to wait for him to call us, and that could be, just every few weeks. But he would usually just say, "Oh, I'm just training the Afghans. It's just kind of boring here. We're not doing anything." And I think at one point I was even considering calling up the Army or representative or someone and complaining, you're wasting all this money. But I didn't realize that's what they all tell their families. He was seeing quite a bit of action. So.
Is that when the pictures were taken of him riding the horses and things?
No, that was second tour of duty. That was not long before he died.
What was he able, though, to tell you about that first tour? Did he ever really give you much insight into what he'd been up to?
He did talk some. I have to say we didn't ask a lot of questions either, just because we're aware of operational security, and we didn't want to be pushing him to tell us stuff that he shouldn't tell us. My husband had been involved in military intelligence before, so we were aware of those issues. So we didn't ask dates and places or names or anything like that, but. I remember wondering when he was getting ready to come back after his first deployment, was he going to be changed or different? And he was remarkably still the same as before he left.
Could you tell that he was proud of what he was doing, that he felt like he was making a difference over there? I'm just curious if any of that came through.
I'm not sure if we discussed that in particular, but he seemed happy. He seemed content. He wasn't complaining he wasted his time or anything like that. And it was certainly an educational experience. And then when I found out later on about some of the action he had seen, I realized, I'm sure he knew that he was making a difference. I had, a few weeks after Rob died, a civilian government employee called me up, and he was telling me how he knew Rob during his first deployment to Afghanistan, and he talked about his group being ambushed one time, and he said if Rob did not act the way that he had, so quickly and professionally and with so much skill, he said we might have all been killed. And to have someone telling me that, it really meant a lot, and I knew that he was doing his job well.
I can't imagine what it would have been like to hear, the bad news sometime later that he'd been killed in action. When did you start to hear the stories about what he had done and the heroism that he exhibited there? And the pieces start coming together. Sure.
We started hearing bits and pieces of what happened almost right away. I'd say within a day or so after Rob died, the wife of one of his teammates had called me. And her husband was with Rob at the time that he died. And she didn't go into much detail, but she just said that he's a hero, he saved a lot of lives. And then in the next few days, we got a couple more calls from people in Afghanistan, and they gave just sort of a basic outline of what happened. And so we knew, pretty soon afterwards that he had, died heroically. Although I do have to say, we were also still pretty cautious about what we believed, because we know that sometimes, when the full investigations are done, things aren't always as they seem. Eyewitnesses make mistakes or whatever. So we were kind of cautious about believing this, but, still hearing it, reading about it, it did, make us, it was definitely comforting.
I imagine because what he did saved so many lives. He saved his team, he saved everyone there, all the Afghan national soldiers. That's really remarkable what he did.
Yes, the fact that everyone else got out alive has really meant a lot to us, and I know it would have meant a lot to him. Because I've seen, interviews or read interviews with some of the more recent Medal of Honor recipients, and I think they all lost at least one, sometimes more than one other person in their group, in their unit that died. And I know that they carry a heavy burden, survivor's guilt, that sort of thing. And I think if, Rob had made it out, that would have made it so much easier, for him to know that everyone else got out.
His friends said all along that the character he showed in those last few hours of his life, those characteristics, those qualities, really were there from as far back as they knew him. Does it maybe seem the same way to you? I'm just curious. I know you've done an awful lot of thinking about it.
I can see a lot of those characteristics in him all along. I have to say he was he had attitude problems growing up. He was a real handful. He was definitely his own person. If someone, if the family wanted to do one thing, he would always want to do the exact opposite, and sometimes there'd be pretty loud arguments over it. And he was mixing it up with his brothers and sisters a lot. But still, there was definitely strength of character there, stubbornness, and generosity. I remember one time at the Field Museum, he got lost with his younger sister, and I went into sort of a panic mode when I realized they were gone. I thought they were ahead of us in an exhibit. In fact, they were behind. And it took me maybe about 15 minutes or so to come to the conclusion that I've got no idea where they are. And I had to contact security, and they said, "Oh, he's over here at the security office." So I went and got them, and one thing that security person said to me was he was watching out for his little sister.
That speaks volumes right there.
Yeah.
For a brother.
Yeah.
For a brother. Was there any inkling early on that the Medal of Honor might be in the future on this, or how did you find out about that?
Our casualty assistance officer told us within a few days after his death that he'd been put in for a high award. And I think between the fact that we didn't even know what the high awards were, and we were concentrating on Rob's loss, really, at the time. We didn't even bother asking. And at his funeral service, the general who presented us with his Purple Heart and a couple of other awards also told us that there would be another award coming. But once again, we didn't ask what it would be. And it was about 6 weeks after his death, a friend of mine who had been in the, had worked for the Defense Department and still had a contact there, she was the one who told me that he was up for the Medal of Honor. So, and it was a few months before the Army confirmed that, that was the award, the level his award was at. And we didn't get much information, over the next 2 years. Just every now and then we'd hear that his teammates had been re-interviewed, or we went through our congresswoman's office at one point to try to get more information. And all the Army would tell her was that the award was pending review. It was just very frustrating. We didn't really have any sense of movement going on. And then we get the phone call from the White House saying he was getting it.
What, I hesitate to ask the question, what was that like? But that's got to be an incredible moment when you get a call like that.
My husband and I were mostly relieved more than anything when we got the phone call, because it had been 2.5 years. We had no sense that the end was in sight, and the Army emphasized there's no time frame on this. We thought it could drag on for months, or another year, or we just didn't know. So when we had been told that someone from the Defense Department would be calling us up about the award, and I didn't want to get my hopes up. I just thought, well, they're going to ask some stupid little bureaucratic question. And my husband happened to be home that day, so the phone call came, and he went to get the other line. And when I picked it up, it was just a woman saying, "This is the White House. The president would like to speak to you." So when I heard that, I knew what it was about. I really didn't think he'd be calling to say, "I'm not awarding your son the Medal of Honor." But really, it was just a sense of relief more than anything.
What did the president say to you, if you don't mind my asking?
I actually had one of my other children was kind of distracting me at the same time, but to the best of my knowledge, the president said that he had reviewed Rob's award, and he had decided to award him the Medal of Honor. He said that reading over his story almost brought him to tears, or he almost cried, something like that. And he said that my husband and I had raised a fine young man. And that was about it.
And of course, a little later, you went to the ceremony for that.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been really something for everyone there. I imagine there were people from Rob's unit there.
There were a lot of people from the military there.
Yeah. It's a family affair, but it's also a family affair as far as the nation goes. It's something like that. Could you kind of speak to what that must have been like, or what that was like for you all?
First of all, it was a very busy time. We were doing interviews around then. There were different things to go to. We had dinner with the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Casey, the night before the ceremony. And then we had the ceremony itself and at the White House, and the next day there was a different ceremony at the Pentagon. So it was very busy, and we were very happy, very proud that he was getting this award. I know a lot of people were saying to me, and other family members, they're saying, this must be bittersweet for you, this must be difficult, bringing up memories. But actually, we really looked at it as a celebration of Rob's life. And, it was a happy time for us. We were glad to see he was getting the recognition. And there was a conclusion. That was really the hard part about waiting. He hadn't even gotten any sort of temporary award. And then to read what he had done, and finally after a while, we did realize this is what really happened. And there was no sort of recognition. That was kind of hard to, we were kind of like in limbo, all that time. And finally, it was over with, and we were very happy.
And you said to me a little earlier, and I want to go back to that a little bit, that you want people to understand that this story isn't over, that you want his legacy to live on. You want people to get to know what he was like, and maybe emulate those qualities, if I may say so. His story isn't over. You're going to continue celebrating his life.
Yes, Rob's story still lives on. We know that his actions inspired others. There was a battle just a few months later at the Shock Valley in Afghanistan where it was a very difficult situation, and some of the soldiers from his unit were in that battle too. And we know that when they had seen what he had done, and the action where he got the Medal of Honor, it inspired them to keep going, to keep their heads, to withstand the enemy when they were in a very dire situation again. And knowing that, he has inspired other people to act courageously, that really means a lot.
What do you want people who may be seeing this to take away from Rob's story, to know and learn more about his legacy?
I'd like for people to know that, first of all, he was a patriot. He really loved the United States. He was very proud to be an American. He had a lot of determination, whether it was doing gymnastics or learning foreign languages or becoming a special forces soldier. He was determined. He didn't give up, or he would, but he realized that there are some things he couldn't do. Like with gymnastics, he wanted to be on the team at University of Iowa, and he realized when he saw the other talent that was there, he realized this isn't going to happen for me. But he didn't give up. He thought, I'll just change course. Gymnastics isn't my calling in life. I'll do the Army now. And it was something that he had always wanted to do. It was just a matter of timing. And I think courage also. When you read about what was going on, the details of that particular battle. I had even asked his teammates the first time that they were telling us a lot of details about what happened. I said, well, what did Rob do that was different, that he was put in for the Medal of Honor? And because in my mind, not being a soldier, I was thinking he was just fighting back. This is what soldiers do. And they said the difference is he could have gotten cover. That was his job, to get cover and try to take out the enemy from there. But it was a very dire situation. And rather than looking for cover for himself, he took on the enemy. He went after them. He not only took them out, but he distracted them away from the other guys on the team so that they were able to reach safety. And that is just tremendous physical courage, because there was so many bullets flying around him at that time. And he stood up to it. and he succeeded in his mission.
I'm just about to the end of my questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. This is kind of a different honor that the state of Illinois gives to very, very few people. They don't do it very often posthumously, and it's very very fitting that they've selected Rob for this honor. What did you think when you heard that the state where he grew up in was going to honor his memory with the Lincoln Medallion?
We were very proud that he's getting this award, and it does mean a lot. My mother's family goes back generations in Illinois, and they've done a lot. They lived in the Chicago area, and they were teachers, doctors, builders, and they were all very proud to be Americans. They were second, third generation Americans. Americans, proud to be in Illinois, and to see the state recognizing Rob as one of their own, giving him this honor, it does mean a lot.
No question about it. Well, thank you so much. Before we stop, is there anything I didn't ask or didn't touch on?
Oh, no. My mind's kind of fried.
Oh, well, you've been traveling and everything else. I thought